All right, betters, I have another amazing interview for y'all today. My guests are Kelly Chase and J. Christopher King, and they are behind the production of a new documentary series called Cosmosis. It's available online. There's links in the description. Please go check it out. It's a 3-episode limited series covering, the UFO phenomena. And to be honest with you, this conversation was awesome. I super enjoyed diving in deep into what the phenomena could be, right? Taking the stance that this phenomena is real and who are they, right? What are they about? I found this to be quite revelatory and engaging, right? Kelly and Jay's sort of passion for their project and studying the phenomena is honestly quite contagious. And I encourage everyone to go watch this series. Again, Cosmosis. It's available online, all the different streaming platforms. I'll put a link in the description where you can go find everything you need about it. All right. So with their permission, they've allowed me to show the trailer for this series. I'm going to play it right now, and then let's begin this interview, y'all.
What I saw that night, I can never forget it.
There was a connected feeling as if it could read my mind. So I waved up at it.
I just remember after that experience, I felt like my life was supposed to be lived a certain way, that effectively I was given a second chance.
People don't just experience it in flight. There are other experiences that they're not even reporting.
There is an extraordinary conversation going on about UFOs and technology and weapons, but not the experience, not the actual experience of being face to face with this.
I think when somebody sees a UFO or has an experience of one, it kind of forces you to confront what your belief systems are, how you feel about things, how you feel about other people, your place in the world, and how big or small it is.
A lot of the stigma that surrounds this subject has to do with the manufactured campaign, an institutionalized campaign to keep people from talking about it, especially scientists.
If you're confused and you're lost, it's because the people who do this are great at their jobs. They've been perfecting this for decades. They're not craftsmen of disinformation. They're artists.
The fact that we're not alone in the universe, it's paradigm shifting. It's huge. It could be the biggest story in human history. So why aren't more people talking about this?
We don't need to wait around for the government to give us the answers. The UFO phenomenon is a part of our reality. It's not something that the government can lock up in an underground bunker somewhere and keep from us. It's everywhere, and it's happening all the time.
If you look at the history of humans, you're going to see that it's a history of engagement with non-human intelligence, because a lot of people believe in non-human intelligence.
I think it's very difficult to talk about the strange stuff, precisely because it's so strange.
We're living in a little corner of the world, just a little corner of it that we call reality. We need to turn off the lights, open the door, and walk out of this little house we live in, and then we're going to start to see something real.
All right, without further ado, Kelly Chase and J. Christopher King, enjoy. If one of y'all want to sort of take the lead here and just kind of give us a overview of this new project and production called Cosmosis, right? Is there a subtitle to this?
Yeah, do you want to take this one, Jay?
Cosmosis.
Sure, it's called Cosmosis, UFOs in a New Reality. And in a lot of ways, we wanted to kind of approach the subject a little bit differently than most or many projects have been doing in recent years. I've worked in TV for a long time. I'm 46 years old right now. I got into TV when I was about 29. And there's a situation, especially it's fiction, it's nonfiction, it's every genre, that there's a lot of copycatting going on, and so you see something and you're like, oh, I could make that better, and then you don't really think about changing the structure. You're just like, how do I take a chocolate cake and make a better chocolate cake? And we wanted to make a different kind of cake entirely, I think would be an accurate way to put it. We wanted to have new faces. There's been kind of an over dependence, not calling anyone out specifically. There are so many great programs in this space, but we wanted to show something new, and that involved having new faces, younger researchers, and having a representative assortment of the names that we know, but really diving into things like the frameworks behind this stuff. Like, if, assuming that UFOs are true, and we do from the outset, there's no kind of, another thing that happens a lot with these shows is that they'll spend 6 or 8 or 12 episodes and then land at the end of season 1 with like, maybe there's something to this. Well, we wanted to really unshackle the situation. If you've got somebody like Whitley Strieber, or you got Diana Pasulka, or you've got Kreipel, or whoever, and is kind of shackling them with like, how are UFOs real? Do you really want to do that? Or they have so much more deep thoughts and so much reasoned knowledge and data that they've come to these ideas with, over decades. Whitley's been in this game for like over 40 years, right? As an experiencer himself, and then like a deep thinker on this stuff. So we wanted to really unshackle people and look at the frameworks, and like, since this is real, like, what does this mean for us? What does this mean for the nature of our reality? Like, what are some of the assumptions that we've made about this stuff that maybe they aren't quite true? And what do we know to be true? And like, how do we come to those conclusions? And like, how do we address that moving forward?
Yeah, well said. Kelly, you want to add on to that a little?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I agree with everything that Jay said. And I think, we really just wanted to create something that split the difference between, being accessible for people who are new to this field. There's more people waking up to this stuff every single day, but we also wanted to advance the ball in a way that the UFO community, we hoped, would feel proud of and also feel represented, because so much of the conversation very naturally gets filtered through this lens of disclosure. And we wanted to kind of circumvent that and talk about the more human side of this and have this as a conversation kind of in a separate sandbox. And so, yeah, I think that was really kind of our goal going into it. And I think because we took a different approach, it ended up being different. And we hope that people like the way that it's different.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, that's actually what I liked about it, is that y'all weren't asking, is this real or not? You kind of just went past that, and you know what I mean? We're exploring much different ideas that intrigued me completely. I was actually blown away by the show, and I honestly thought it might be like similar shows as what you said. Okay, they're going to spend episode 1 going over just everything we've seen and this, that, and the other, and is this real? What's going on? But y'all, that's what was cool about it, is it just went past that. And I agree. You have certain people in front of you. Why talk about those? Let's get into the nitty gritty of things. And honestly, for someone like myself, who, to be honest, I haven't had an experience, in any anomalous experience, and I'm still wondering, trying to find out my own journey, right, of what's going on and exploring this. And I was enthralled by it. To be honest with you, the production was great. It was really cool. I enjoyed every episode, basically for that reason. It's like, oh, we're getting into this here. This is cool. Which I think, even for someone who's not familiar, even with the top, you don't need to do that other stuff. There's a million other shows doing that. So I like that y'all took that approach. A chef one time told me, Patrick, you want to take something familiar and give it a twist. Right? You don't need to rewrite the book here. It's like you could just, and I think that's what y'all did, and I like that. It was a cool twist to take, on this show. So what's been like some of the feedback that y'all have gotten? That is, let's do it both ways. Let's do both sides of the coin. Maybe some feedback that you heard that you liked, but also some feedback that was like, you might have done differently in the show.
Good question. Kelly, do you want to take it first?
I mean, I'm gonna sound like I'm lying, but I haven't seen a ton of negative feedback, which like no one's more surprised about that than me. Like I say with all the love in the world, like UFO Twitter is not always the easiest or the friendliest place. And so we've felt really
Yeah.
supported. There have been like a couple people have had something to say, but I think in terms of um, what we were trying to accomplish and what we were able to do. I mean, we did this with we raised $125,000 of investment from traditional investors almost entirely outside of the UFO space. And all that sounds like a ton of money, and it is a ton of money. It's about a fraction of an episode of um, Ancient Aliens, and we were trying to make a show out of that. And so, I think maybe if some people have I'm extraordinarily proud of our production value. I'd put it up against just about anything, but some people
Yeah.
have said some stuff about that, but I'm like, listen, do better for 125K. Let's see what you can
What?
do. It's not easy.
I thought it was great production value. To be honest with you, I would have never. I couldn't have put a number on the budget. It seemed super high quality, like in my opinion. It fit right
Oh,
in
thank
with,
you.
when you click on Apple TV or sometimes you watch stuff on Amazon Prime or something that's UFO related, you watch it and you're like, what did I just buy, man? That looks crazy. This looks like I've seen YouTube videos better than this, but I did not get that feeling at all. I thought it was like a Netflix show or, you know what I mean? Like legitimately, that's what it felt like, especially the intro. Dude, that was sick with the owl and everything. I was like, "Oh, this is cool, man." Now, I thought the graphics y'all did,
Oh,
everything
thank you.
was in my opinion well put together. But Jay, what do you think, my man?
Yeah, no, I appreciate your feedback there. I mean, we benefited a lot from um, our not just our knowledge of people in the field, in the field of ufology and the field of anomalous study in general, and kind of a wider framework. So being able to bring in people like Joshua Cutchin and Daniel Elizondo, folks like that. Joshua Cutchin, of course, he's kind of a comparative mythologist, but he is really adjacent to a lot of these issues. He wrote a book called Ecology of the Souls, which especially volume 2 is like really heavy on ufology stuff and is kind of like pushing the ball forward in a way. A lot of people point to Jacques Vallée and Passport to Magonia and that kind of idea. And there are very few people that are really pushing that area forward in terms of comparative mythology and looking at all this stuff. But Joshua is really doing that. And at the same time, like I have a long history in TV and film production. And so I was able to like pull out, dust off the old Rolodex and bring in some like really amazing people and some great recommendations that I've been hearing about for years. So like, some of the interview stuff, it's the interview guy from Chopped, right? And like that seems like nothing, but he lives 2 towns over from me. And like one of my best audio buddies from an old show is like, this guy is amazing. And he was incredible. Kelly and I like had the best time with this guy, Joe Bondelich. He was great. Right. We were able to really benefit from pulling out the Rolodex and really looking at things and bring together an incredible crew. So like for the intro sequence, we got this guy, Alfie Dwyer, that does stuff for Adult Swim. I was just talking to him earlier today. Knowing people like this is absolutely incredible. It's been like a wonderful gift for the show. So along those lines, good feedback in terms of like the production value, good feedback in terms of like the tone. We were really trying to, I think that there's a lot to be said for a structure. Like a lot of people don't think about structure in this space, especially when they're thinking about a series. They'll just like get to the end of a show and they'll be like, well, I don't know what that was. See you next week. And there's not really any, but like you have to think about a beginning, middle, and end. And like Kelly and I were thinking about that all the time. And I'm glad that that's reflected in the positive feedback that we've gotten from people. As far as constructive feedback and things that people didn't like so much, I mean, there are aspects where we brought in people like Jeff Kripal and Diana Pasulka and Stephen Finley, and these are religious studies folks, right? That also like touch on philosophy and many other social science angles. But, they're looking at like, what is the system of belief? One of the problems that I have, and like I know that Kelly feels similarly, is that when people look at UFOs and religion or think about the two of them together, they think that people are automatically trying to start a cult or something this way, right? But
Sure.
if you're thinking about something where you're really handling like something that's been functioning within the realm of mythology, and it really affects our belief systems and is kind of in these edge states in these really strange ways. When you look at it, as Courtney says in our show, when you look at the Bible, like the Bible is a bunch of anomalous experiences. Like that's why they wrote it. Like that's why it exists like that, right? And that's true for a lot of situations. The difference here is that like when some people in the community look at people like Kripal or Pasulka, they think that they're looking at a minister. They think they're looking at a priest. And in fact, these are the people that study those belief systems. They're not of them themselves. And there's a crucial distinction there. And so if we're thinking about belief systems, if we're thinking about how do we separate ourselves and how do we think about this in a structural way, in a responsible way, then it makes sense to look at the people that are analyzing the systems of belief structures like that.
Well said.
Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know people were looking at Diana Pasulka like she's a priest or a nun or something. I didn't even know. Like, what the hell? Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
already.
You see all sorts
I
of
knew
crazy
that.
stuff online.
Well, that's for sure. But I mean, like, let's just say, you know, no matter when I worked, when I had my food truck, for instance, in Austin, no matter how great the day was or whatever, at the end of the day, I would always be like, man, I wish I would have done this. So is there anything like y'all wanted to add into the show, but you didn't get a chance, or something that was on the cutting room floor that, you know, you wished had made it, or I don't know?
I mean, I think you end up leaving so much on the cutting room floor for sure. I mean, some of my there are things that like there are things that at the beginning that I never would have imagined we would have cut. Like just as an using Diana as an example, you know, the idea that she talks about in terms of redaction, like the ways in which not just that, you know, the ways that we tell these stories differently to ourselves, not just to other people, and how an understanding of the ways that we redact ourselves help us to get closer and kind of excavate the core of what these experiences actually are. And I think we touched on it tangentially, but like that's something that I would have loved to have done more of a deep dive on. But at a certain point, like you kind of just have what you have, and you know, I've said that in terms of like writing projects that I've done, the television's very different. And, you know, if I'm writing for my podcast or something like that, that's sort of painting. I'm creating something out of whole cloth. But when we're creating, as Jay and I were working together creating the show, it's like sculpting. You're like, you have to keep taking away and taking away and taking away and until it's the thing you're trying to make. And unfortunately, you end up taking away some of your favorite stuff. But we're thinking about different ways to save some of that content to like resurface it and share it with people, because we cut so much that we're like, gosh, this is gold. So we're working on that.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you see Courtney's ranch in Texas, and it's, for those of you that haven't seen the show, there's a lot to it, and maybe we can dig into that further into our conversation here. But you know, it's a paranormal ranch. Courtney lives on a ranch where there's like a long history of paranormal situations, and part of that we covered a cattle mutilation case, and I think we covered it pretty well. Like it was a beautiful, like for the subject matter, considering how dark the subject matter is, it was actually a beautiful shot. Like the shots looked great, and I was like really proud of them. It was in this field of flowers, and I was like, this is so weird. Like it looks incredible. Like, and there are a lot of interesting conversations to have about like, why was it found there? And like, it was Courtney's like prize. It was like his favorite cow. And like, you know, what does that mean? And like really kind of looking at things beyond just the kind of like surgical aspect of the case, and looking at kind of the history of the ranch, where it was and things like that, and trying to get more context there. And I thought we did a pretty responsible job of it, or at least had the seeds for like a really thoughtful segment. But in the end, like it didn't fit the tone of what we were looking at with some of the other segments, the way that it all fit together. And at the end of the day, that overall structure and that through line of reasoning and like where are we going in our exploration, it didn't quite fit. It became kind of more of a distraction. And so that would be one thing that like I really wish that we could have had that more nuanced conversation there, but it couldn't happen in the context of our 3 episodes.
Yeah, no, well said. I mean, that's so similar to like cooking and creating menus and like especially tasting menus where you're trying to tell a story from this dish to this dish and you create a bunch and you have a lot of ideas, but then you go, you know what? This is a great dish on its own, but it doesn't fit in to what the story I'm trying to tell here. And, you know, it's like films and whatever, it's like a scene may be really cool, but you know what, it doesn't fit the whole story here. And you cut the fat, essentially, as we say in the kitchen, right? You got to cut the fat and kind of get to what we're trying to do. And I can only imagine trying to put together what y'all did, and you have so much footage, and yeah, you have this cool piece. Oh, this would be great, but you know what, we're telling the story, what happened before this and what's happening after the scene. We have to consider that too, right? Like you said, the whole thorough line. I'm glad that y'all had that in mind. It clearly shows, it tells a story the whole way. It keeps you kind of engaged. So yeah, no, that's super cool. Kelly, you said something on a clip that I saw today on a episode, on an interview you did with Night Shift. Shout out to Clint. Love Clint. Had him on the show many times. I've been on his show plenty of times. Great guy. And you said something that's really stuck with me because I've actually had the same sort of thought, being new to myself in this community, which is, and I'll let you take it away. I just wanted you to know what exactly I'm talking about. You basically were trying to separate, the this journey of trying to get disclosure, from the government, but also there's a journey to just study the phenomena on its own, right? Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you mind kind of explaining that a little bit, and then we can dive into that because I love that idea.
Sure. Yeah. Happy to talk about this. And, this is something Jay and I talk about all the time. And I think in some ways was maybe at least the secondary thesis of Cosmosis, like kind of one of the ideas that we were really trying to get across, which is that, you know, we've gotten to this place with with disclosure, and disclosure is extraordinarily important, right? But at the same time, I think that if once you're staring at this long enough, you realize that kind of like that it's not quite what it appears to be, right? I think that, I've been thinking a lot about Carl Nell's talk at Soul, the first Soul Symposium, and there's been so much talk about that particular talk because he was really kind of laying out not just the timeline of disclosure, but also kind of what the rationale was, how they were balancing various risks against each other, the sorts of thinking and risk mitigation that would even cause them to move forward with this in the first place. And to be there and to sit in that audience and be like, well, gosh, it looks like we're a few years into what appears to be a like 15 to 20 year process. And when you and everyone like talks about that, and everyone talks about that talk, but what I'm not seeing a ton of is people like recalibrating how they're interpreting what we're looking at with disclosure through that lens. And it doesn't have to be like we get stuck in these binaries where it's like, these certain people in the field, they're either absolute heroes or they're like from the devil. There's nothing in between. And when the truth is that like the intelligence apparatus is something that we created to keep us safe, to keep certain information away from our enemies, which in today's connected world involves keeping it away from us. Like, it's not an institution from which we should be seeking truth, because that's literally not how it operates. It's not what it's set up for. It's not what it's meant to do. And so, like, these people don't have to be evil people, but it's pretty clear that whatever it is we're dealing with disclosure is some kind of a long range, I hesitate to say psyop because it's so much negativity associated with it. But I mean, it's basically an operation that's being put forward to help people acclimate to something that they think it's going to take us about 10 to 20 years to acclimate to. And there's nothing, there, like I said, there doesn't have to be anything nefarious about that. But in the meantime, that conversation is defining everything about how we talk about the UFO phenomenon. If it's not coming through those kind of like official disclosure channels, then we can't really trust it. We got to wait for the science, except who's doing the science? Where is the science happening? Like, and we're supposed to just continue it to be sort of like this question and answer session with the intelligence community about what's going on here. And meanwhile, we're acting as though this is something that they can keep from us, which they can't. The UFO phenomenon is everywhere. It's in every culture. It's throughout our history. They can't hide it from us. So like, we don't have to wait around. Like, those things, it's not that I'm against disclosure. I think disclosure is a good thing. I want to help wherever I can. But like, I also think that, and this is something I know Jay and I talk about all the time, that we need to be creating kind of a different track of inquiry that acknowledges that disclosure is not the end all be all of what we know about this phenomenon. There's so much more, and we don't need anyone's permission to explore it.
Yeah, no, well said. You want to add on, Jay?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with everything Kelly just said. And, amplifying what she said to a degree, the situation is such that, as it's often said by folks that we all know in the community, well, there's always the comparisons to China and Russia, and we have to keep careful of China or Russia. Those are often the two kind of boogeymen, like, nemesis that we see in kind of like the nation states. And then there are others, obviously. There are consortiums. There are even, situations that could be beyond a nation state in terms of intelligence, as people have kind of started talking about, like, what are these drones, these quote unquote drones over arsenals and such, like very close to me and around the world, right? Like maybe it could be a private intelligence company, and what would that entail? And like there's actually a lot, there's a lot of possibilities there. It's something that we've actually looked at as a community and in general for years now. But when we talk about the disclosure movement, there's all these kind of situations where, and I agree with Kelly, it's incredibly important. I was at the Grush hearing. Like it was a huge historic day. I was happy to be there. It will remain like a very key memory for me for the rest of my life. And it was incredibly inspiring. And I hope to see many more inspiring days like that, and more good legislation put forward and things like that. And at the same time, I'm also the director of the Experiencer Group. And I hold support sessions for experiencers every week where we're comparing, like, I have incredibly profound, incredibly bright, brilliant people in that community that are sitting and comparing notes about what they've experienced. And like, I see more data points connecting in sessions like that than I see online. And it's because of the tone online. And it's because of the way that these conversations have been stigmatized. And that's my subjective opinion, of course, and other people can view it differently. But like, from my perspective, like Kelly, we need to take an all roads approach to this. If you're interested in this field, if you have gifts and you're interested in this field, whether you're an engineer, a physicist, a chef, right, a podcaster, an anthropologist, if you're a futurist, if you're a folklorist, if you're a psychologist, if you're a psychiatrist, if you're a doctor, there are so many paths to travel on this and gifts that you can bring, because it touches on all aspects of our lives. It really, really does. And so, it's not about saying like, boo, DC. But the thing about it is that look at what's happened here. I mean, so much of the world recognizes the systems of propaganda that have like infiltrated our legacy media, right? Like on all levels. I mean, look at this last election. Look at the drone spin. Look at how anytime that there's a tragedy in the world, it gets spun. It's not even. It's almost as if in some situations, like there's more attention paid to like how to spin it than how to deal with the fallout and how to like help people. I mean, look at people already with the fires in LA. That's a horrible, horrible situation. I mean, like just one of those fires is like twice the size of Manhattan. Like this is wild stuff. And like, what does that mean? And what do I see on the news? People are like, which politician is to blame for this? And it's like, there are much bigger questions to ask here. And there's lots of boots on the ground stuff to do right this very moment, but that's how we've been trained. That's perception management. That's social engineering. And that's another thing that we try to cover in Cosmosis, like how that perception management, how that social engineering affects our lives and what it does to us. So yeah, there's brightness to it, there's darkness to it, and we try to paint with all the colors of the rainbow when handling this topic.
No, well said. I mean, try telling the firefighter actually fighting the fire, "Hey, which politician do we blame?" He's like, "What the?" I'm here trying to
Exactly.
put out the fire. So like, I get it. There's always a disconnect between right what's actually happening and how it's told what's happening. There's always a disconnect there, and probably till the end of time. And I know the internet didn't make it any easier. It kind of helped, but it also it's a double-edged sword, right? It's the good and the bad come with that access to immediate knowledge because everyone has access to put out knowledge and you don't know where they're coming from, and whether it be the media, just a regular person posting, an influencer, right, whatever. It's hard to dive through the waters and wade through the waters of information and find a buoy to grab onto so you don't drown essentially. Yeah, absolutely. No, well said. And I completely agree. I think many things can happen at once. Why does there just need to be one thing happening? Or like, I've never understood that in this community and the pushback on that. Like, this isn't good for disclosure. I've heard that before. I'm just like, what do you mean this isn't good? I mean, what does that even mean? Like, people are doing things. What's the problem? Why can't we be pushing for government disclosure, but then you have people like yourselves doing what y'all are doing, like, and everything in between? Why can't it all happen? Why do we all need to be like doing the same thing? That actually seems counterproductive to me, in my opinion. And I mean, at the end of the day, I think Kelly, you said something I definitely agree with. Like, the apparatus of the American government isn't really set up to give us quote unquote the truth. So like, I'm not sitting around waiting for it. You know what I mean? Like that's because you have to manage your expectations. Otherwise you will be disappointed, right? If okay, it's Wednesday, right? Okay, tomorrow, did I get disclosure from the government? F them. Thursday, then Friday comes. Did I get disclosure from the government? F them. It's like, what am I going to do that every day? So I think you just have to find where you can fit in, find where you can help, find where you can be, a part of the solution. And if you think something isn't going right, s- you know, do what you're not seeing, right? Get in
Absolutely.
and fill in the gaps. Yeah, go ahead, Kelly.
Completely agree. And I think, I think it's so funny that, I mean, not funny. It's stress.
You
It
could
just
say
shows you
funny.
what the situation is, right? It is
Yeah.
funny a little bit. Is that like, as much as the UAP Disclosure Act, like that's kind of just the fact that that was even introduced, that was such a huge step forward for us, and like everyone feels so crushed. I know I felt crushed, like when once again none of the language was included in the NDAA this year. But at the
Sure.
same time, like what that legislation was modeled after was the legislation that was created to create transparency around the JFK assassination. And we're not exactly like swimming in JFK transparency around here. Every single president that's had the opportunity to pun on this has, and the same
Yeah.
mechanisms were baked into the UAP Disclosure Act. And so, I mean, it's not that these things don't matter, but I think that we just have to have a perspective about like the progress that we're making, and that this is something that's going to happen in years and decades, not in months, but that doesn't need to discourage us. Like we can just literally go work on this ourselves, and disclosure is going to keep chugging along. You can check back in and you can support it however, but there's other work to be done, and we don't have to wait around for that.
Yeah, well said. I mean, think about like what other movement happens, the change happens overnight. It didn't name any movement. It doesn't. It takes, I mean, look at civil rights.
Right.
I mean, we could go down the line. It takes a long time for change to happen. And you kind of got to inch at it and keep pushing and pushing. And I've had my own frustrations for sure with things. And I think it's okay to voice people's, your opinion about things. But I mean, ideally, yes, any movement, it just takes time. And I don't think we've actually been pushing that hard in the government for this. So in like, pulling back and looking at the forest through the trees here, right? Like it actually hasn't been that long technically, right? Like it's kind of been a blink of an eye. So yeah, I think anyone expecting it just to, like you said, to happen within months it's just not realistic, to be honest with you. And you kind of got to push a little bit, get a few more people on board, keep pushing, a few more people come on board, more people come out. I'm all into citizen, journalism and citizen investigation, and people just kind of doing their own work and focusing on experiencers, even that have nothing to do with the government. There's no filter. I have to, decide, are they trying to trick me? Is this real? What their former, okay, that's great. But how about just my neighbor Jim who told me a story? I like that. I like that story, if I'm being honest, because there's no filter. It's just somebody telling me what they experienced, what happened to them. And I find that more powerful, to be honest, than anything. Which is, I don't know. It's a tough journey, and I know it's an individual journey for everyone to take, right, along this path. Um, let's say y'all, for instance, right, y'all have each had your own journeys, right, in this topic, right, and very profound ones. What are the differences, like, before you had this profound experience to after, right, like before and after? What is that big change, right? Like, how does that change your kind of journey? Does that make sense what I'm asking? I hope it does. I don't know. Did I
Yeah,
say it right?
absolutely. I mean, no, totally. I completely know what you mean. So, um, I had an experience about 3.5 years ago now that's hard to explain, but it felt like some sort of an altered kind of consciousness where I sort of saw outside of the flow of space time. And it changed me. It completely changed everything about how I see myself, how I see the world. And, you know, I think I'm still unpacking a lot of what those changes mean. But I do think that,
Sure.
like a lot of people who come through an anomalous experience, that they, end up feeling um, like they have a sense of purpose that they didn't have before, that there's like maybe a direction that they're supposed to be moving. And that was something that, and sometimes is still hard for me to talk about because there's part of me that's like, that sounds crazy. But I mean, the more I talk to other people, the more I realize that this is a data point, right? This is how this stuff impacts people. I became much more concerned about um, spiritual things. I don't talk about that nearly as much in my work because I kind of want people to find their own path. But like that's definitely in terms of what I'm personally concerned with, something that's become much more important. Um, and yeah, it's just changed the way I see everything. When you start to recognize, I really was living within this paradigm personally where I thought there was nothing but the physical materialist world, and that when you died, that was it. And I got popped out of that in just kind of like a second one day. And there's no way once you see it to go back. And so, that's been my journey. Jay's is different, which is kind of cool, and it's made a cool dynamic between us because this is more of a lifelong thing for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I thank you, Kelly. Yeah, and for me, I'm sure a fair amount of people that are listening may know some aspects of that or my story or what have you.
Sure.
But when like the kind of broad strokes are, when I was a young kid, I lived in not one but a couple houses that were what you would consider to be haunted. And so there would be like poltergeist phenomena, like weird shadow figures, apparitions, really kind of the kind of stuff that really makes you question from the get-go, what's a body, what's an intelligence, what is space-time, like how can objects be affected in a situation like this. And I was young, in the first house I was 6 years old. And then strangely enough, when I got a little bit older, I had the first experience with UFO and HI phenomena. And there were two grays in my bedroom in southern Indiana when I was about 9 years old or so. And I still don't know what to make of all that. I don't know where they're from. I don't know what their names were. I don't know if they had names. I have fleeting memories of situations like that. And I don't pretend to know. I don't pretend to know like why that house seemed to be haunted. I don't pretend to know what those grays were or whether they still exist or anything like that. And so that really shaped the whole course of my life. Sometimes I'll get asked like, what would your life be like if those situations hadn't happened? And like, I have no idea, because like that's been my whole life. You know what I mean? I can't remember very well a time before things got weird. And not only that, but like it got weird for my whole family. You know what I mean? And like it got weird for my ex-girlfriends and like some of my very closest friends. I mean, for Pete's sakes, there's been like weird anomalous stuff just from like Kelly and I hanging out the last few years. there are some people, and I know a bunch through the experiencer group, that it seems like they're almost magnets for anomalous activity. And for better or worse, like some people think of me as that. And I don't know what to make of that. All I can do is like dig in, explore, connect dots, and like move forward. And so, it's been baked in from the beginning. It's like I got drafted before I even knew that there was a baseball game being played. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I can't imagine. Uh, you know, yeah, I can't imagine. To be honest, do you feel like were those experiences frightening? You know, like scared? Do you feel
Yeah.
frightened in your daily life, or is this something you get used to? I mean, clearly it sounds like something both of y'all didn't ask for. It just happens, and then what do? You got to deal with it, right? Or what? I mean, that's life, right? You got to move ahead. So I can't imagine if it felt frightening how to push past that.
Yeah, I mean, like I think that there's an element. I'll speak first, just since it's continuing on that last question. I think that the weird thing about the haunted house, at 6, is that when you're that age, when you're that young, like whatever is happening it's often your first time encountering something. It's like the
Yeah.
first time you go to a beach, it's the first time you get on a plane, it's the first time you're on a school bus, all that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
and new things are happening all the time, every day. Oh, it's the first time I had Chinese food, whatever it is. And you just accept it as like what the world is. And so though there were scary moments, it wasn't as scary to me. And strangely, like some of the high strangeness things, there's a nature versus nurture, there's a chicken and the egg issue here. And like to me, like things were always looser than they were to other people. Like for example, in that first haunted house, there'd be situations, there'd be like a knock on the wall, right? There would be like a loud noise, like a bang. You'd look over like towards the source of it, and then you'd look back to where you were just looking, and the objects would have been moved around, right? Like some kind of strange prankster, trickster, poltergeist activity, right? And
God.
yeah, that sounds really scary, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
like like a lot of people would consider that an objectively scary, or like something that's meant to scare somebody. And
Sure.
to a degree it was, and at the same time also, because of my age and because of my childlike mentality and things like that, I just took it as true because it was obviously true. It was happening right in front of me. And there's also the thing where it's like when you're that age, people, you'll see a magician, you'll see David Copperfield or David Blaine on TV, and they'll do like a little cup trick or a card trick or something like that. And there's a playfulness to it. And
Yeah.
for whatever reason at that age, some of that stuff reached me as being playful rather than scary. And like, I think that like navigating that boundary, and then other things were scary, like those shadow beings, for example.
Sure.
And like navigating that boundary between playfulness and scary and like what's possible, yeah, it's really informed me in such a way that here I am, and it's like 40 years later. I just turned 46 years old, and I'm still ruminating on these issues like I was back then, and I will continue to be like I through the rest of my life, I'm sure.
Yeah, right on.
Kelly,
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah,
you
I mean,
the scary the
yeah, mine
scary
mine are a
Kelly.
little different. Scary. Mine are a little different because it's mine weren't scary, but that doesn't mean that they weren't traumatic. Because I think that there is something really traumatizing that happens. I mean, the experience that I had where I kind of experienced that altered state of consciousness rewired who I was on a fundamental level in like 90 seconds, maybe like under 2 minutes.
Sure.
It was so fast. And I'm a happier person as a result of it. I'm a more fulfilled person. I think I'm a more useful person. I have a sense of purpose about my life. But at the same time, I can't unknow the fact that at one moment I believed one thing and saw the world one way, and in the next moment, seemingly without my consent, um, that I suddenly saw the world entirely differently. And that can be that is traumatizing. It just is. We talk about ontological shock and all of that. But in some ways, even that's a good thing. I think that, moving through it definitely makes me more skeptical. It makes me more paranoid. But it also, I'm definitely more skeptical of my own thoughts, because I understand that how much they can change, and I realize how contingent what I believe is. And so it makes me question myself a lot more, which can be a destabilizing place to exist, and to live your life in a place where you feel like you have to question yourself all the time isn't easy. And that in of itself has been really traumatizing. But I think that in terms of what it brings to my work, and how it can kind of, in some ways, it keeps me wondering if you're crazy, in some ways keeps you from going crazy. So
Sure.
I'm grateful for it in that respect. But yeah, it's a head trip. I don't know what to make of it.
Yeah, no, of course. Like, what do y'all have any like hopes, like any, you know, I guess let's put it this way. If you could, I guess more for you, Jay, I guess, well, Kelly too, I guess you continue to have experiences. Like, if you could make it stop, would you? Or do you want it to continue to happen, these experiences?
Um, as as far as it goes for me, like I made a very conscientious effort in my 20s to make it stop, through sheer force of will or like shifting my behavior. I did a lot of experimentation. Like maybe if I just stay up all night, like nothing will happen. Maybe if I live like this, it'll happen. Maybe if I eat this, or,
Oh, I
I
see.
tried to
Yeah.
change my patterns like over and over and over again to try that. And it didn't work. And in fact, what I found was that in a certain situation, and this is completely subjective, and I could be totally wrong about this, but the more that I wanted it to stop, it seemed like there were situations that were more demonstrative and were underlining the fact that like that wasn't going to happen, that it just wasn't going to happen, and that this was my life. And um, it really, it was hard. It was very hard because like I lost friends. There are people that I dated that didn't want to, that they'd wake up in the middle of the night, and like all manner of things were going on, and they weren't into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, how do you do that? How do you, like, somebody that's in college? I was in my 20s. Like everybody, we're all just trying to make our way in the world, and at that age, like you're trying the best you can. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Of
And
course.
it's hard. And like nobody wants to be alone. Everybody wants to feel loved. Everyone wants to love somebody else. And it's hard to figure out like how to have that conversation, especially in a society, in a world where you're meant to feel crazy just for experiencing it. So what? You get infatuated with somebody, you go out on some dates and you're like, gosh, I could really spend some time with this person. I could really like, I think I could really love this person. Maybe they'll love me too. And then like, when do you bring that up? Like, when do you bring up like, if you sleep with me regularly, like eventually you're going to see some wild stuff, and it might break your brain a little bit. It might terrify you. Like, when do you bring that up? And so in terms of like your hopes and like
Wow.
what do you want, like, I hope, and like one of our big aims with Cosmosis, and one of my aims with the Experiencer Group, and just like the general thrust of things, is like not just normalizing these conversations, but really, really going the next step and like providing frameworks for people, and like trying to contextualize things and bring nuance to the conversation, and doing it in an honest way. So it's not just like, oh, there's a ship in the sky. A lot of people can't relate to that. But if you bring up like the whole range of experience, the whole range of anomalies, it starts to become much more relatable to people. Because like on our show, when you show the Venn diagram where precognition and things like that come into play, all of a sudden it becomes more relatable, because almost everybody has somebody in their family, or a friend, if it's not themselves, that has shown to have something like that. It just is like that. Like, who hasn't had the situation where it's like, somebody random is going to call right before they call, and it's like there's no rational reason why they did. Or like you feel the sense of being stared at from behind, and you're like, who the hell is staring at me? People report that all the time. It's like a common occurrence, right? And yet, like, it's made to seem like magic, and it's not. In the case of like the sense of being stared at, a lot of neurologists will point at mirror neuron transmitters, and like they'll say like, oh, it's your mirror neuron transmitters, that's what's doing that. And it's a predator prey phenomenon, and you've been involved to do it, and that's very likely true. But like, like the difference between magic and science, there's a thin boundary there. So like exploring that, really pushing into that, so that we can have more intimacy with each other, so that we can know each other better. In our show, there's Courtney in episodes 1 and 3, and like the way that him being able to talk about his anomalous experiences with his grandmother, who also had anomalous experiences, and his son, who also has anomalous experiences, it gave them a depth and a richness to their family that like is so amazing and like enviable even. Like I wish that like in my family history, when I was that boy's age, that there would have been that kind of openness and honesty about these things. And we can work to create a future where that is possible.
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful, man. To be honest with you, I remember my father, rest in peace. He passed away in 2015, but I'll always forget a story. I'll never forget a story that he told me. I don't know how it came up, why we talked about it. My dad was in the Air Force, very straight laced, born on a farm in Missouri. Just nuts and bolts. Hard work gets it done, Patrick. That's it. No, stop complaining. Get to work. And I don't know what we were talking about, and we were, I think, just discussing the house that he grew up in. And I remember him telling the story how, and again, he didn't really believe in any kind of anything outside of his just normal worldview, right? Like what's in front of him. But he always told this story about when he was growing up, how when no one else was home and it was just like him and his brothers, my uncles, they'd be down in the basement playing or something. Again, no one else is home, but all of a sudden they'd hear these footsteps, over the top and indistinguishable. He's like, they were footsteps going across, and there's nobody else home. And they'd run up there and nobody would be there. And it happened a lot. And it turned out that like the area of where they grew up was like old, Native American land, right? And I don't know. He just always had this idea. It's just like, I don't know what it was. I don't know what it was, and it was odd, and I can't explain it. And I think you hear so many stories like that, right? And clearly we don't have all the answers for everything. Clearly we haven't reached the wall of reality of like, well, that's it. This is it. There's nothing else. So that unknown, and I think that's what makes it hard for people to understand or want to push away from or not want to be a part of, because it's unknown, and the unknown is scary, right? That's why Jaws works so well. You don't see the shark. You just know about it. You just hear it. You just hear that, but in our imagination, we create it, our own way, however that is. And I find that fascinating. I think that's what's always kept me interested in what else is out there. What else don't we know? What other reality is there, right? Like I think about, I did this pilgrimage in Spain called El Camino de Santiago. And it's a spiritual pilgrimage where you walk like hundreds of miles. So I did like 550 miles in 29 days on foot. You just walk on foot and you sleep in a different spot across Spain. So I walked the whole northern part of Spain on foot. But when you get to the end, there's something very special called Finisterre, which is a point on the beach where at one point back in the day, that's where they thought the earth ended. Like, so you got there, you looked out at the water, that's it. There's nothing else. This is it. That's what Finisterre means, end of the earth. Like, that's it. There's nothing else. If you go out there and take a boat, you're going to fall off the edge. So don't do that, right? Like, that was it. And imagine coming to that reality where you realize, oh no, that there's more to this, right? And there's so many examples of that in history where we learned that there is more than, meets the eye than what we see. And I think that's got to be so fascinating. I can't imagine in some ways I'm jealous of people that have had experiences, if I'm being honest, in a way, because I'm like, I want that. I want to feel that sense. I want to know that there is more. But in some ways, I'll be honest, I'm a little scared. How terrified would I be of that as well? Maybe it's a little bit of both, right? Like, and maybe it just takes time, which I'm glad that experiencers come together, and I'm glad that people can use each other for support and learn from each other and try to understand whatever happened to them, because it is a unique journey that each person has, with the phenomena, whatever it is. Yeah, I find that fascinating and powerful. And like, what do you hope to get out of this? May sound weird as a question, but what do you hope to get out of the phenomena moving forward? Is that even a valid question to ask?
No, I love that question, actually. I love that question. I think that something that's really cool about this field is that just about everyone I've met, whether or not they've had an experience, um, who works in this field has had some kind of they've either had an experience or they've reached a place with just the data and all of the evidence that there is, that they just have this flip where they recognize, like, oh my gosh, this thing is real. And for people who have gone through that and then who kind of open themselves up to this field and are trying to contribute in some way, I think we all find ourselves, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I feel like it's just about everyone. Like, I find that when I talk to people in this field, that everyone has this really deep sense of purpose and of mission and of the fact that they have a role to play in this somehow, and they have a vision for how they're going to do that. And I think that that's absolutely remarkable. And I think it's a beautiful thing. And I think it's honestly maybe the thing that we need most in the world right now, because so much of our culture has become passive and receptive, and we're just like constantly taking in these streams of content and information. Like, we're consuming stories, we're not living stories. And the thing that I think is most beautiful about the phenomenon is that it seems to, whether people encounter it intellectually or like they have an actual anomalous experience, that it breaks people out of that kind of rote, everyday, stuck in a loop kind of behavior. And suddenly you are part of something and you are on a mission and you see what your role is, and you care, you like deeply care. And for me, that's been the most rewarding part of all of this, has just been doing that. I think humans are a really cool thing, and that when we come together to create things together, that we become more than the sum of our parts. And to be a part of this movement, I think, is so important just in the terms of human history. I think we all can be proud to say that, like, we're doing this work and that it will matter. Um, but I also just really like the part where we all get together as adults. Like, I think when you're a kid, you get together with your friends and you like play and you like create something, or you make something, or you create this world together. And as adults, we kind of don't do that. And so I just, on a personal level, really love that about ufology.
Yeah, well said. What do you think, Jay? Want to add anything?
No. I think she landed. That was like a Simone Biles level, dismount.
It's the only kind of flipping I'm going to be able to do, but
no, that's it though. That was good.
Too old for that.
Oh, I love that. That's hilarious. No, that's funny. Okay, so you guys make this show, Cosmosis, which people will check out for sure. Like, what are y'all? I have to imagine you're thinking, okay, season 2. What are some of the thoughts or ideas you're having, or ideas that you want to explore in, the next season? Is that what you call it? The next season? I don't know. What are y'all calling it? The next? I don't know. Is that it? Next season?
Yeah. We are thinking, we're definitely thinking about next season. I mean, it's really early, right? Because the show just came out a little over 2 weeks ago. It came out on December 30th. It premiered at, it was just the day after it came out, it was number 2 on the TV charts on Apple TV. It was right behind Yellowstone. It was like an absolute incredible situation, like right from the jump. And almost all of that is just word of mouth. Like, we've done a handful of podcasts like between the two of us, and like it's just within the last week that we're even like doing a couple together, and we've spent almost no money on marketing, nothing like whatsoever. We have $0 for a budget for marketing, and so to see that kind of a response is absolutely amazing. I mean, the first week it was like number 4 in Canada, it was number 4 in Australia. It's doing incredibly well on the charts on Amazon, in the documentary zone. It's been hovering in the top 10 around there since it's come out, and that has really kind of emboldened us. And now we're like, okay, well, let's get into it. But we're really at the beginning stages, and so we're really starting that conversation. We do have like a couple areas where we're looking at, okay, what would the first shoots be, and so we have some areas where we know where there's going to be constellations of the kind of people that we want to talk to again. But we really have to develop a lot of the ideas. But if you, for those that have watched the show, we definitely kind of landed at the end of the day with the season, pursuing a few different tracks. And what are these frameworks? Where are these beings coming from? Like, are they native? Are they interdimensional? It's reasonable to assume that we're going to keep exploring like the nature of non-human intelligence and who these beings are and where they're coming from. There's been this overdependence in UFO shows and just the lore and like the common discourse over the last years on the nuts and bolts craft, and that's totally understandable. They're cool. There's grainy, weird video, like very grainy videos of them that we've seen, stuff like this, right? And then now there's this drone, quote unquote drone flap, this flap of what seemed to be military adjacent drones, giant SUV shaped drones out here in New Jersey and elsewhere. And then there are also like Lake and Keith and Picatinny and like other places, there's orb phenomena over some of these arsenals, just like we mentioned, like by what seems to be chance. We were covering the Mario Woods case, and he was looking at this stuff happening back in 1977. Like, there's a consistency to this stuff. So, we're going to be kind of pursuing some of that stuff, and then, we'll have to see what else is there. There's an element where I think I would love to hear what Kelly has to say, but we're really trying to thread the needle responsibly, so that we can push the conversation forward in a reasonable, thoughtful way that's like that enriches the conversation for people that have already been here, and is also something that is that resonates for people that are just joining the conversation, in a way that videos of aircraft carriers and cockpit videos is not going to do for a lot of the populace. Kelly, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's kind of two parts of the story that are the most interesting, and that are, speaking about separating this out from disclosure, but are kind of the two things that we're not really allowed to talk about in disclosure. And that's where we want to go. We're kind of heretics in that way. I think that there's the question of who they are, right? Of like really asking that question. Like, for some reason, we're allowed to talk about the craft and the vehicles and like all of this other stuff. But if you start asking who they are, like that conversation gets derailed very quickly. And so we want to talk about who they are. But there's another question that always comes up in the midst of all of this, which is like who we are, because our relationship to them suggests many things. And, and I don't think we have any firm answers there, but, in asking who they are, we inevitably end up asking who we are. And partly that's on some like highfalutin philosophical level, but also if you just get down to the brass tacks of it, and the actual impacts that these experiences have on people's consciousness and the consciousness connection that we know is there. And also if you just look at like the people who to this day are still guiding the conversation around ufology, that are still doing the podcast circuit, that are still showing up at conferences, right? A lot of these people, you can trace them all the way back to The earliest programs in the government that were set up around psi phenomena and human potential, like the Stargate Project and that sort of thing. So, on the surface, it looks like they're into UFOs, but if you go back, the thing that these people have been interested in, the way they all even know each other in the first place, is about human potential, psi abilities, consciousness, what happens after death. Like, these are the things that they actually care about. And in a way, it's not that UFOs aren't cool and interesting, but in a way, they're almost like a diversion from this larger conversation, which is around who we are and our interaction with this non-human intelligence, or ecology of non-human intelligence is probably more likely. But and I think that's what we want to explore, because we're not allowed to talk about that stuff, so we're going to talk about it.
Yeah,
Love that.
absolutely. I just wanted to say one more thing because I
Yeah.
think it's funny, but like, in so many ways we've been kind of corralled into this corner. We've been corralled into this corner for years, and it's about the craft, and they're cool and they're interesting, and again the cockpit videos. But it's like, if you discover that there are Japanese people, and then you just decide that you're only going to look at Toyotas, right? Or you discover that there are British, you discover the United Kingdom, and so then you just start looking at BMWs, right? Or you breach land in Germany, and all you do is look at the Volkswagens. Like, why? Like, what? Like, look at all the stuff that you'd be missing. Look at all of the data that you'd be missing. Look at every situation and why not just explore that land? Why not just explore the people? Like, why not just move into that kind of a direction? And according to, I think, Kelly and I, for sure, like, not enough people are really looking at that. And it's great that other people are pursuing the other stuff. Like, what are in those hangars? Like, what's at Area 51? What's in Huntsville, right? What's in so many other places. But then, there are other conversations to be had, and we want to have those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be honest, like, even for someone like myself, my favorite conversations are speculating on who they are. Who are these? What do they do on the daily? Like, what does their life, look like, and their interaction with and all the different possible, like, that to me is some of the most, enticing conversations to have, actually, in this community. I know I do an open mic Discord every day almost, um, with a lot of other people from the vetted community. And we talk, and those are the most engaging conversations, when people just start speculating and giving their theories on what this could be and who they are. And we're not talking about, grainy UFO videos and stuff. And it's really getting down into the nitty gritty, because I think those are the things that people really think about when they're sitting on a beach by themselves and staring at the waves, or they're at night around a campfire or whatever, right? Those are the kind of deep conversations that you have. And I think y'all are the perfect people to explore that. And I actually think you could find your niche there, and most people would actually be engaged with that, more than anything. I mean, how many great YouTube videos have you watched where they just explore these theories of, what these civilizations are like, or who these people are, right? Or whatever, however you describe them, whatever the phenomena is. And I think admitting, one, that we don't know, and then trying to throw out different ideas of what it could be. And I think it's fun, it's engaging, and it's powerful. And I love that. That's it. That's season 2 right there. Cosmosis. Who are they? Boom.
Yeah.
Let's get in. I love it. Honestly, I love that. Like, I would be excited to see that, especially coming from people like yourselves. Because one thing would be to have some idiot like myself talking about, like, well, I think they're this, and I think, I'm the wrong guy to do that. But someone like yourselves, who can really bring a lot of knowledge, y'all's knowledge of history, I've seen, is just so profound and so widespread. Filtering that through these theories, right? Looking into the future. That's so cool. I love that. I absolutely love that so much. Like, what is, just to kind of end on a fun note here, like, what is, you might have your most probable theory of what you think this phenomena is, and I'm sure it's probably nuanced and multifaceted, maybe not one answer, but what do you want it to be? Like, if you could choose what the phenomena is there one in particular you would choose over another? I don't know. Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
Totally. I love this question. I Um, I am team crypto terrestrial all day long. Like if I could choose what it is, and
Yeah.
to be honest, I don't think this totally fits the evidence, but to me, like an a completely flesh and blood, tangible, like breakaway civilization of some kind, but preferably like not non-human or not totally human, something that goes way, way back, just something ancient, something maybe that's living at the
Yeah.
bottom of the ocean. People who know me, like, you're really my friend when we've sat up till all hours of the night while I go into a very long rant about mer people, because I can talk about mer people for a very, very long time. So like that's the stuff that gets me really. You don't hear me talking about that on podcast because I know it's out there, but it's in terms of just like pet theories and stuff that gets me excited. It's like mer people and Hollow Earth. That's like all I want in life.
Love that.
Yeah,
I love
I
that
can,
answer.
I can also back up that is what Kelly wants to be talking about at 2 a.m. Absolutely, hands down, 100% of the time. That's we're traveling, we're out and about. You know what I mean? We're getting our time zones mixed up and all that stuff. It's the end of the day. We've been traveling all day. It turns into Hollow Earth. It turns into all this stuff, and that stuff's great. I love that stuff. It's amazing. It's super fun, and there are a lot of fun stories that would back up some of that. The stories of like the ant people and bringing people, and bringing indigenous tribes down underground during catastrophes and stuff like that. There are a lot of like really evocative situations, right? And then there are other situations where like RD6 Killer Clark talked about a lot in her work, and she's really underknown these days. She is a Native American kind of folklorist. She did a lot of like field work. She was more of an anthropologist than anything else, and she really collected stories from folks, Native Americans and folks through Mexico and Central America, and there are a lot of evocative, brilliant, kind of genre busting, outside of the box, not our discourse conversations about star people and other intelligences, whether they're coming up from under or coming down from the sky, or just blipping in. And as far as I'm concerned, like I love the mer people stuff. I love the crypto terrestrial stuff, and I also, there's something between the interdimensional theory and the kind of contactee telepathic situation. It's not unlike the kind of cosmic download situation that Kelly was describing earlier for herself. But, there's something about looking at people like Jane Roberts, this channeler from the 70s, who was huge, the Seth material and stuff like that. And I have a bunch of those books, and like, I don't know whether it's literally true or not, but I do know that they have made me seriously consider alternative conceptions of like our universe and like the cosmos and things like that. And they were just like, coming out of this tiny little woman, and she'd just be like, she would just get into this channeling state, and she'd often have like a glass of wine and a cigarette in one of her hands, and she would just be like spouting like hours and hours out of the day. Yeah, no, incredible stuff. And like those books, they were huge hits at the time, and they really changed a lot of people's lives. And like, I think that there's some uncomfortable areas here where like some of that stuff there's a lot there. And even the most nuts and bolts people like have to sometimes begrudgingly admit that one of the big through lines of non-human intelligence and the conversation of that, and a lot of people are bringing it up because of a very popular podcast right now, but it's because of telepathy. It's about direct communication directly into our minds. Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And so there's a lot there. And so like, if we were to marry our two like pet fascinations in some ways between Kelly and I, you would find, maybe a Hollow Earth person, or maybe a mer person, a crypto-terrestrial that was capable of telepathy. And it sounds very, very, very possible, But at the end of the day, like on our show, Cosmosis, we asked Greg Bishop, like, like, what do you think is the craziest thing that could be true? And he says, like, that it's all true, that it's all true. And I think that that's also possible. We like
Yeah.
when we look up at the stars, there are almost certainly advanced extraterrestrial civilizations somewhere, right?
100%.
Like, I mean, it just, yeah. I mean, look at the stars in the sky. Like
Yeah.
if we're the most advanced thing out there, that's really sad. It's super sad
Yeah.
in terms of like space.
Yeah.
And then there's, but then like you think about, Mike Masters was just in town. Kelly was just in town too here. Kelly was staying with me. We went and hung out with Mike Masters. It's fun to hang out with Mike Masters. It's fun to like be out and about with him in Manhattan and just being able to like spout off about time travel, right?
Sure.
And like that stuff seems like when you're talking to Mike for hours at a time, it like the longer that you're talking to him, the more time travel seems super possible to be in the mix as well, right? So I think we have to
Yeah.
keep all the options on the table and recognize that like there's like a strong likelihood that at least 2 or 3 of these things are definitely in the mix, and that we may be looking at like a wide ecology of beings that are just like on the edges of our perception at any given moment.
Fuck. Yeah, absolutely. God, I love talking about this stuff, to be honest with you. I love thinking about all the different theories. And yeah, I love the crypto terrestrial theory too, to be honest with you, Kelly, because it's like it would be a total M. Night Shyamalan twist of humanity, right? Like, oh my God, they've
Yeah.
been here the whole time. Like, are you kidding me? That would be absolutely insane. But so does
Right? The
interdimensional.
call is
That
coming from
sounds,
inside the house.
yeah, the call is coming from inside the house. Exactly. But I love time travel. I mean, by accepting time traveling being, wait, now time travel is real, like too, like that also sounds cool. Interdimensional sounds cool because there's other dimensions. I mean, what are we talking? I love them all, to be honest with you. It's hard to kind of pick which one I would hope it would be. I think I would like time traveling extraterrestrials just because if I could like experience some of it, I would love to time travel myself. Who wouldn't,
Mm-hmm.
right? So,
Oh,
the
absolutely.
crypto terrestrial one, as much as I love it, it would also be kind of scary. Like
Yeah.
we haven't been at the top of the food chain on this planet the entire time, and we thought we were, and that idea could be kind of scary. But well, if they've left us alone up to this point, well, not left us alone, but you know what I mean. They're not engaging us and disrupting our lives on the daily in everything we do. um Maybe it could be some sort of a better friendship and we could evolve even quicker and learn things and whatever. I don't know. I love it all. I love talking about these different theories for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Wow. I have to admit, this is fascinating, and I have to imagine like the next project with Cosmosis coming up, deciding on like, okay, you set up certain interviews. Do we build around what they talk about, or do we try to have a narrative that we ask them certain questions to get the answers we need for this, the script we've written or whatever? Like that also has to be difficult. Do you go with, well, we have access to XYZ and this, that person, so we should build it around that. Yeah, I can't imagine honestly the hard work that goes into it. And also something I was thinking about, like with the program, for instance, with James Fox, I'm interviewing him coming up here, and
Nice.
it's about like, how do you make a documentary that takes a year or two or series like y'all did and try to keep it current and relevant when things are changing on the daily, right? And that's got to be very hard if that's your goal in the series or documentary, is it for it to be relevant in the moment. Whereas what I loved about Cosmosis is, yeah, there's, you guys sprinkle that in for sure, but a lot of it is timeless, it's evergreen, right? And that is kind of honestly probably the best way to go when it comes to making these sort of things, because how do you keep up with people like myself who can do it on the daily and pop out information and across the internet, right? Like it's just, how do you keep up with that and try to, right? How many times have you seen a comment of like, old news, this is old
Right.
news, it's like,
Right.
okay, what
Oh
am I supposed
man.
to do here? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, and I get that, and I do it on the daily, so I can't imagine doing an extended project like I'll do that takes so much time to not hear that. But again, I think the threads y'all pull are evergreen and they're timeless, and that's I think that's a good just business move, to be honest with you. I mean, there's money involved. Like, I mean, you got to make your money back. Otherwise, how are you going to do the next project? I mean, there are logistics to this to some extent too. So yeah, I cannot wait for the next one. I'm kind of sad that I watched all three and that I've seen them, because I don't get to watch it again. So I'm jealous of people that just get to, like, like a good movie, and you meet someone and they're like, I haven't seen that movie before. You're like, I'm jealous of you, because when you sit down, you get to watch it the first time and take it in, and that's cool. And I want that moment back again. Yeah, so cool, guys.
Oh, thank you.
Is there
I really
is there
appreciate that.
anything that we didn't
Thanks,
talk
Patrick.
about that y'all wanted to make sure that we got out? Clearly, I'll put links to the film and how to get it. You kind of explained that too, but yeah, is there any sort of thing that we didn't discuss that you want to make sure we get out? I don't want to leave anything out.
Yeah, I would just say that if people are looking for the links, we have watchcosmosis.com is set up with just like links to the various platforms. We are working
Okay, sweet.
on, it's really important to us to get this in front of more of an international audience. It's a little complicated, but we are working on a solve for that, hoping to announce that later this week. But we're going to continue to update all of that at watchcosmosis.com so you can pay attention there, because we have more platforms, more territories, and we're going to just keep pushing on that. We really do believe this is like a global conversation, and it sucks that it's so hard to get content, especially independent content, like outside of just the United States or just the English speaking countries. So we're working on it, and just want to say thank you for everybody who's been patient while we're figuring that out.
Of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah, along those lines, it's hard, like, because of what we were trying to do and what we were trying to accomplish. I mean, part of it is, a huge chunk is the show itself. And another part is to inspire people and to make something that's truly independent so that we could say what we wanted to say without dumbing down the conversation. And you can argue with whether we did a great or a terrible job of it, but we did the job that we wanted to do with it. And like, if nothing else, whether it makes you happy, whether that makes you angry, however it happens, like, we really do believe that, like, everybody should aspire to be able to speak their minds and be able to have independent thought and independent discourse be a relevant, important part of not just podcasts, but television and movies and things like that, right? We've gotten so used to this huge divide between it's either a podcast or it's a Marvel movie or something like that.
Yeah.
It's something with a crazy budget. And we're trying to show that there are middle paths that you can take, and that people can actually, that it can be okay, and that, like, we can observe international laws, you know what I mean? And that's what we have to do to, like, get things into other trains. It's not just like you can drop it on YouTube and then everybody sees it. As soon as it gets into television, there are all these, like, obscure broadcast laws and taxes and all this other stuff that you have to get into when you start moving into different terrains. And so we've been really kind of, like, learning as we go in terms of, like, broadening into that. And so, right now it's in mainly English speaking countries, unless you have a VPN, in which case you're set, generally speaking. And we're going to be moving out further. But for right now, Prime Video, Apple TV, YouTube, you can buy it on YouTube in some trains as well. And we're going to be moving into more, and watchcosmosis.com is the way to do it. I really appreciate being on the show today, Patrick. We haven't had a chance to talk before all that much, and it's really great to be here today. And I love how much you sprinkle cooking tips and tricks into what you do. It's awesome.
That's all I reference everything back to that, because that's what I really understand. It just was a big part of my life, so it helps me understand things. Basically, I'm a very visual person. I like to try to build out the image in my head of whatever somebody's talking about, especially something so complicated and profound as this. For sure. No, this was an awesome conversation. I look forward to having you guys on again. And I've already talked, privately to a bunch of people about watching y'all's show and how much I loved it. And it wasn't it wasn't like anything I had seen recently in this topic. And to be honest, period, if I'm being honest. So I really did like it a lot. I'm not just bullshitting when I sent those messages out, like, blowing smoke up y'all's ass. I really meant like, this was great. I just was not expecting that. I think that's what I loved about it too. And maybe that says something about the topic, the expectation I had. This is going to be another, and to be fair, I like all of the documentaries and stuff that come out, if I'm being honest, even if
totally.
even
I
right, even
watch
if
them
it's stuff
all.
I know.
I watch them all.
Yeah, I watch them all too. I'm intrigued by it. Like I like taking in that information. I know there's a big push in this field of like, oh, it's over, dramatized theatrics, and that I don't care. I like I can see it for entertainment too. Like, it's intriguing. It gets me thinking. It creates a conversation. It gets me wanting to dive into certain topics deeper. And I think that's really, at the end of the day, is a minimal goal for what y'all are trying to do, is just that: create conversation, get someone interested in the topic, and dive in deeper wherever they fit in or want to. Right. So yeah, again, this was such an awesome conversation. I'll absolutely put links in the description for everybody to go check this out. So anyway, thank y'all.
Well, thank you so much, Patrick. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Y'all were awesome. Thank you guys so much. And can't wait for round 2.
Thanks, Patrick.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me weep.